Elijah Sposa, o Elijah tu tumba, advertio el jefe Apache, el ganadero cuido paralizado. The sun was slowly rising over the vast plains, casting a golden glow across the rolling hills and dusty trails that stretched as far as the eye could see. Don Miguel, a seasoned rancher in his mid-30s, sat astride his old horse, Santiago, scanning the horizon. He had spent most of his life working the land, tending to cattle, and building a reputation as one of the best ranchers in the region. His ranch was modest but prosperous, with sturdy fences, a small barn, and a herd that was steadily growing. Miguel loved the land as if it were part of his family. Every hill, every tree, and every stream held a memory of long days and hard work. However, the land he loved so much was not empty. Beyond the gentle hills lay territories that belonged to the Apache people, a proud and ancient tribe with traditions that were deeply respected by those who knew the stories. Miguel had always known of the Apache and their fierce love for their land, but like many ranchers, he had hoped that his business and careful planning would allow him to expand into the borderlands without causing trouble. After all, he thought, his intentions were honest, and he had never harmed anyone. On this particular morning, Miguel was on horseback, riding along the edge of the territory, inspecting his cattle and checking for any signs of trouble. The air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of sage and dry earth. Birds chirped in the distance, and the occasional coyote howled far away. Miguel felt a sense of peace here that he had never found anywhere else. Santiago trotted steadily, his hooves raising small clouds of dust with each step. Miguel felt the rhythm of the land beneath him, the heartbeat of nature that reminded him why he had chosen this life. As he reached a small rise overlooking a riverbed, Miguel noticed movement near the trees ahead. At first, he thought it was just deer or some small animal, but then he saw the figures more clearly. They were Apache warriors dressed in traditional attire, their eyes sharp and watchful. At the front was a tall man, older than the others, with a calm but commanding presence. This was Chief Nate, known among the Apache as a wise leader who protected his people and their traditions fiercely. Miguel's heart skipped a beat. He had heard stories of Nate, but he had never met him face to face. The chief stepped forward, his gaze fixed on Miguel. The other warriors stood silently behind him, forming a quiet, powerful line. Miguel dismounted slowly, holding the reins of Santiago. He tried to appear calm, though inside he felt a mixture of fear and curiosity. The chief did not speak immediately. He simply looked at Miguel, his eyes seeming to see straight through him. The silence was heavy, filled with the tension of two worlds meeting for the first time in this quiet part of the plains. Finally, Chief Nate spoke, his voice deep and steady. "You walk on our land," he said. "Do you understand what that means?" Miguel swallowed hard and nodded. I mean no harm," he replied. "I only wish to check the borders of my ranch. I do not wish to disturb your people." The chief's eyes narrowed slightly, studying Miguel's face. "Intentions matter little if the land is disrespected," he said. Miguel could feel the weight of the words. He knew the chief was right. Even without intending harm, crossing into this territory was serious. For a moment, the two men simply stared at each other. The sun rose higher, shining down on the plains, highlighting the lines of worry and determination on Miguel's face and the calm strength in Nate's. The other warriors remained still, their hands resting near the bows and knives at their sides, reminding Miguel that they were capable of swift action if needed. Despite the fear gnawing at him, Miguel felt a strange respect for these people who defended their land with such dignity and courage. Chief Nate finally spoke again, his tone firm but not cruel. "You have come here before understanding our ways. You must choose wisely, for your life and the lives of those you lead may depend on it." Miguel blinked, confused. I do not understand," he said. The chief stepped closer, his presence commanding the small clearing. "You will understand," Nate said slowly, "when you are ready. For now, know this, The land is sacred, and those who wish to walk upon it must honor it. Miguel nodded again, trying to hide the unease building in his chest. He felt a sense of paralysis, as if every choice he had made in life had led him to this very moment. He had never been a man to back down from a challenge, but this was different. The challenge was not just physical, it was about respect, understanding, and survival. Miguel felt a mix of fear, curiosity, and admiration. The chief was not threatening him openly, but Miguel understood that a single wrong move could have grave consequences. The chief signaled to one of the younger warriors, who stepped forward and handed Miguel a small bundle wrapped in soft cloth. Miguel unwrapped it carefully and found a simple token inside. A carved piece of wood shaped like a heart, tied with a piece of leather. The chief's eyes never left his face as he spoke again. "This is a symbol," he said. "It reminds you that your choices have weight. Life and death are often separated by a single decision. Remember this as you move forward." Miguel held the token tightly, feeling its weight both in his hand and in his mind. As the morning passed, Miguel and Chief Nache exchanged a few more words. The chief spoke of the land, of the history of the Apache, and of the importance of understanding and respecting traditions. Miguel listened intently, realizing that this encounter was more than a warning. It was a lesson. He began to see that his view of the land, which had been purely practical and business-minded, was incomplete. There was a deeper connection between people and the earth, a connection that demanded humility and respect. When the chief and his warriors finally mounted their horses and began to leave, Miguel felt a strange mixture of relief and unease. He watched them disappear into the distance, the wind catching the feathers in their hair, their horses moving with a silent grace. Miguel returned to his own ranch, but he could not shake the feeling that his life had changed in that single encounter. Every shadow seemed longer, every sound sharper. He realized that he had entered a world far older and wiser than his own, a world where the rules were different, and where choices could have consequences he had never imagined. That evening, Miguel sat by the fire in his modest home, staring at the token the chief had given him. He turned it over in his hands, feeling the smooth carvings and the faint warmth from his touch. Thoughts raced through his mind. What did the chief truly mean? Was this a warning of danger, a challenge, or a test of character? Miguel knew that he had to be careful. He had faced storms, rustlers, and harsh winters before, but this was different. This was a test of judgment, understanding, and courage. As he lay down that night, Miguel could hear the distant cries of wolves and the rustling of the prairie grass in the wind. Sleep was slow to come, and when it did, it was filled with dreams of vast plains, horses, and faces he did not recognize. Faces of men and women who had lived on the land long before him, who understood its heartbeat and demanded respect. Miguel realized that he was standing at the edge of a new chapter in his life, one where every decision mattered, and where understanding others was as important as protecting his own land. By dawn, Miguel was awake again, riding Santiago toward the river. The plains looked different now, somehow deeper and more alive. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him, not just for his ranch, but for the delicate balance between his world and that of the Apache. He knew that the coming days would test him, challenge his courage, and force him to make decisions he had never imagined. But he also felt a spark of determination. He would meet the challenge with respect, wisdom, and careful thought. And somewhere in the distance, he knew, Chief Nache was watching, waiting for Miguel to prove that he could walk the line between bravery and wisdom, between life and death, between understanding and arrogance. After the encounter with Chief Nache, Miguel returned to his ranch. But a sense of unease lingered like a shadow over his land. The plains, which had once felt wide and open, now seemed alive with watchful eyes. Every movement in the wind, every rustle in the grass, made Miguel pause. He knew he had stepped into a world far more complex than his own, where traditions and respect held more power than cattle, money, or even brute force. He had received the chief's warning, but he was still uncertain what it truly meant. Miguel's workers noticed the change in him immediately. They had always seen him as confident and fearless, a man who could handle storms, rustlers, and wild animals alike. But now he spoke less, moved cautiously, and sometimes stared into the distance as if expecting something to appear out of the plains. One morning, Juan, a trusted ranch hand who had been with Miguel for years, approached him while repairing a fence. "Señor Miguel," he said, hesitating slightly, "is everything all right? You've been different since that day." Miguel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I cannot explain it, Juan, but we must be careful. The land is not just ours, and some things demand respect beyond what we understand." Despite Miguel's caution, strange things began to happen on the ranch. A few of his cattle went missing overnight. At first, he thought it was just predators, perhaps wolves or coyotes. But then he noticed something unusual. The tracks left behind were not from animals, but from human feet, moving carefully, silently, as if to avoid notice. Miguel studied them closely and realized that these were Apache tracks. The realization made his stomach tighten. The chief's warning was not an idle threat. They were watching, testing, or perhaps guiding him, but their presence was undeniable. Over the next few days, Miguel tried to go about his usual work, but every task was overshadowed by the knowledge that he was being observed. He rode out to check the far corners of his land, counted his cattle multiple times, and spoke frequently with Juan and the other workers about safety. He even considered bringing in guns and more men for protection, but he quickly realized that force alone would not solve this. He needed understanding. Force could ignite conflict. Understanding might prevent it. One afternoon, Miguel decided to take a long ride into the plains to think. Santiago trotted steadily as Miguel followed the winding paths along the river. The sun was high and the air shimmered with heat. He remembered the chief's words, "Life and death are often separated by a single decision. Remember this as you move forward." The phrase repeated in his mind like a warning drum. What decision would he have to make? And how could he make it correctly? Miguel knew he could not ask the chief directly. That would be disrespectful. He had to find his own way to understand the meaning behind the words. As he rode deeper into the plains, Miguel noticed smoke rising in the distance. Curious and cautious, he approached slowly, keeping Santiago quiet and calm. Soon he saw a small Apache camp. There were several tents, smoke curling from cooking fires, and children playing quietly near the edge of the clearing. Miguel hesitated. This was the heart of their territory. To enter without permission could be dangerous. Yet something inside him urged caution paired with bravery. He dismounted, tied Santiago to a tree, and approached on foot. To his surprise, the chief's daughter, a young woman named Ahioka, stepped forward. She had watched Miguel from a distance, recognizing him as the rancher who had crossed into their land days before. But instead of anger, her eyes showed curiosity. "Why are you here?" she asked calmly. Miguel bowed slightly. "I come with respect," he said. "I wish to understand, not to fight. I want peace, and I hope to learn from your people." Ahioka studied him, her gaze steady. After a moment, she nodded slightly. "Then you must listen," she said. "We do not speak often to outsiders, but those who wish to understand may stay and watch." Miguel spent the afternoon at the camp, observing daily life. He saw how the Apache worked together, shared responsibilities, and respected the land in every action. They hunted with care, ensuring nothing was wasted. They fished in the river without harming the balance of the water. They spoke to the earth, the animals, and the sky in ways Miguel had never imagined. By the time the sun began to set, Miguel felt a profound shift within himself. The land was alive in ways he had not seen before, and he realized that the chief's warning was about more than cattle or borders. It was about life itself. That evening, As Miguel prepared to return to his ranch, Ahioka handed him a small bundle. Inside was a piece of woven leather, tied carefully and decorated with simple symbols. "This is a token of understanding," she said. "It is not protection, nor is it a challenge. It is a reminder that your choices matter, and that respect can build bridges where fear builds walls." Miguel accepted the gift humbly, feeling a mixture of gratitude and awe. The plains seemed quieter now, the wind carrying a soft, almost musical whisper through the grass. When Miguel returned to the ranch, he felt both comforted and troubled. Comforted because he now had a small connection to the Apache and a deeper understanding of their ways. Troubled because he knew that the true challenge was yet to come. Chief Nature's words echoed in his mind, sharper now than ever. "You will understand when you are ready." Miguel realized he was being tested, and the test was not of skill or courage, but of wisdom, patience, and humility. The following days brought new tension. Miguel noticed small signs around his ranch, arrows carefully placed in the ground, subtle markings on fences, and the occasional glimpse of figures moving silently through the hills. He knew that the Apache were watching not to harm, but to observe his reactions. Each day, Miguel's mind raced with questions. How much should he push forward with his ranch? How much should he step back? Every action seemed weighed, not only for his safety but for the balance between his people and the Apache. Miguel also began to think about his personal life. He had always imagined marrying Isabella, a kind and intelligent woman from his town. But now, with the chief's warning fresh in his mind, he wondered if personal desires could conflict with respect for another culture. He realized that his choices might not just affect himself but everyone around him, the workers, his neighbors, and perhaps even the Apache. Sleep became restless, filled with dreams of decisions and consequences, choices and dangers, life and death. One evening, as the sky turned orange and purple, Miguel rode out once more. The plains seemed alive with shadows and whispers. He spotted a figure in the distance, a young Apache warrior who approached slowly, with no sign of hostility. When the warrior stopped nearby, he spoke only a few words. "The chief watches, choose wisely." Then he turned and disappeared into the tall grass. Miguel felt his heart pound. The words were simple, yet they carried immense weight. He realized that the chief's warning was not a threat to be ignored. It was a reality to be respected, a challenge he could not face with force or stubbornness alone. Miguel returned to the ranch, aware now of the delicate balance he needed to maintain. The coming days would require wisdom, patience, and courage, unlike anything he had faced before. The land, the Apache, and his own heart demanded respect and careful thought. He knew that every decision he made from now on could have far-reaching consequences. And as night fell over the plains, Miguel held the token Ahioka had given him tightly, reminding himself that understanding and respect could sometimes save more than swords or guns ever could. From that moment forward, Miguel approached each day with caution and mindfulness. He inspected his cattle with care, listened to his workers more attentively, and studied the land as if seeing it for the first time. Every sound, every shadow, and every sign in the earth became important. Miguel knew that the Apache were not enemies. They were guardians of a world he was only beginning to understand. And in this awareness, he felt a new sense of responsibility, a duty not only to his ranch but to the larger world around him. And so the tension grew, not in violence, but in thought, observation, and careful action. Miguel had stepped onto the edge of a challenge he could not ignore. The plains, the land, and the Apache watched silently as he prepared for the choices that lay ahead, choices that could shape his life in ways he had never imagined. The days following Miguel's visit to the Apache camp were filled with quiet tension. While his ranch seemed peaceful on the surface, Miguel felt the weight of every decision pressing down on him. Each morning, he woke with a sense of responsibility heavier than the sun rising over the plains. The token Ahioka had given him lay on his bedside table, a constant reminder that his choices carried real consequences. He held it in his hand more than once, letting the smooth leather calm his racing thoughts. Miguel knew that he could not ignore Chief Nature's warning. It echoed in his mind day and night. Elijah Sposa, o Elijah tu tumba. The words were simple, yet their meaning was layered with danger and challenge. At first, he had not understood them fully. Now, after days of observation, reflection, and careful thought, he realized that the warning was more than a riddle. It demanded a choice that could alter his life forever. But how could he choose between his love, his safety, and his respect for the Apache? The problem weighed on him constantly. Miguel thought of Isabella, the woman he had always intended to marry. She was kind, intelligent, and patient, a partner who shared his vision for the future. But marrying her now felt impossible without risking the wrath of the Apache. The chief's warning had been clear. The phrase, "choose your wife or choose your grave," was not just a metaphor. Miguel understood that defying the chief could result in deadly consequences. He could not ignore the reality of the situation. Miguel spent hours riding the plains, trying to make sense of his options. The wind whispered through the tall grass, and the horizon stretched endlessly before him, reminding him of the vastness and complexity of the land he had once thought he fully understood. With every step, he noticed new signs of the Apache's presence: carefully placed stones, broken branches, and faint tracks that told him he was never alone. It was as if the land itself was alive, guiding him toward decisions he did not yet know how to make. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in brilliant shades of red and gold, Miguel returned to his ranch with a heavy heart. He had made no decisions, only observed and reflected. The workers noticed his distracted mood, but he did not explain. Words could not convey the depth of the dilemma he faced. He walked through the corrals, checking the cattle carefully, listening to the soft murmurs of the animals, and wondering what steps to take next. The tension came to a head one night when a rider appeared at the edge of the ranch. It was a young Apache warrior, his face calm but serious. He dismounted and approached Miguel without a word. The silence was thick and heavy, broken only by the distant howls of wolves. Finally, the warrior spoke. "The chief wishes to speak. Your time to decide approaches." Miguel felt a chill run down his spine. The warning he had feared most was now unavoidable. He nodded slowly, understanding that this meeting would not allow delay or hesitation. The next morning, Miguel prepared himself for the journey. He rode Santiago toward the heart of the Apache territory, every muscle tense, every sense alert. The plains were quiet, but Miguel felt the eyes of the tribe on him, observing his movements, judging his choices. When he arrived at the clearing where the chief waited, he dismounted carefully. Nate stood tall, his expression unreadable, as if the weight of the land itself rested on his shoulders. Behind him, warriors and villagers watched silently, waiting to see what Miguel would do. Miguel bowed his head respectfully. "Chief Nate," he said, his voice steady but respectful, "I am here to speak, to understand, and to make the right choice." The chief's eyes studied him closely. "Words are easy," Nate replied, his voice calm yet firm. "Actions reveal the heart. What you choose will show who you truly are. Choose wrongly and you risk death. Choose wisely and you may gain honor, understanding, and life." Miguel felt the weight of every word. He knew that this was more than a test. It was a defining moment in his life. As the morning passed, Miguel spoke honestly about his life, his love for Isabella, and his respect for the Apache. He explained that he had never intended harm and that he wished for peace between his ranch and their land. Chief Nate listened, silent and still, letting Miguel's words settle like dust over the plains. Finally, the chief spoke again, his words deliberate and heavy. "You have one choice to make," he said. "Your heart must guide you, but your understanding must lead. You cannot ignore tradition, for the land remembers all who walk upon it. Miguel understood that the choice was not simple. He could follow his heart and risk the chief's anger, potentially causing violence. Or he could honor the chief's traditions, which might mean sacrificing his personal desires and stepping into an unknown path. The thought of losing Isabella was unbearable, yet Miguel felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him like never before. He realized that this was a test of courage, not of physical strength, but of character and wisdom. Days passed as Miguel wrestled with his decision. He spent long hours on horseback, riding through the plains, observing the land and thinking of both worlds he belonged to. He spoke with Ahioka occasionally, seeking guidance without overstepping boundaries. She did not give him easy answers, but she offered insight into the tribe's ways, explaining the importance of balance, respect, and understanding. Miguel began to see that his choice was not just about love or safety. It was about forging harmony between two worlds. Finally, the moment arrived when Miguel could not delay any longer. The chief summoned him to the central clearing once again. The sun was high and the heat pressed down on the plains. Miguel dismounted, feeling the dry wind on his face. Chief Nate stood before him, his expression calm but commanding. "The time has come," the chief said. "You must decide. Choose wisely." Miguel took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every life connected to this decision: the workers, the ranch, Isabella, and the Apache people. Miguel spoke carefully, his voice steady. "Chief Nate, I respect your traditions, your people, and this land. I cannot ignore your warning. I will make a choice, but it must honor both our worlds. I propose a union, not of force, but of understanding. I will marry a woman from your people, someone willing to unite our communities peacefully. In this way I show respect, avoid bloodshed, and honor both my heart and your traditions." The chief's gaze was steady, unreadable. For a long moment no words passed between them. Then Nate nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly. "You have spoken wisely," he said. "This choice shows understanding, humility, and courage. You may live, and your path will be watched with respect." Miguel felt a wave of relief wash over him, mixed with awe at the delicate balance he had managed to achieve. Returning to his ranch, Miguel carried with him a renewed sense of purpose. He understood that life often demanded choices beyond personal desire. The plains, the land, and the Apache had taught him lessons about respect, patience, and courage. He also knew that his love for Isabella would need careful explanation and negotiation, but he felt confident that honesty and respect would guide him through the coming challenges. The following weeks were filled with preparation. Miguel worked with both his workers and the Apache community to plan the union and ensure harmony between the families. It was a careful dance of communication, respect, and compromise. Slowly, Miguel began to feel a sense of peace, knowing that he had chosen a path that honored life, not death, and understanding over fear. Through this experience, Miguel realized that the greatest challenges were often not fought with weapons, but with wisdom. He had faced a situation where every choice mattered, where misjudgment could cost lives, and where courage meant humility as much as bravery. He had learned that true respect for others and for the land could build bridges stronger than any fence, stronger than any herd of cattle. And so, Miguel's journey continued, a path marked by observation, careful thought, and profound respect for the world around him. He knew the test was not over, and that challenges would come again. But he also understood that he had faced a defining moment and had chosen wisely, guided not only by his heart, but by a growing understanding of life, culture, and the delicate balance between them. The morning sun rose slowly over the plains, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange. Miguel sat on Santiago, feeling the soft leather of the reins in his hands. Today was the day he would meet Chief Nate alone, in the heart of the Apache territory, to finalize his decision and demonstrate the respect and understanding he had gained. His heart beat fast, but it was not fear that filled him. It was a mixture of determination, anxiety, and the weight of responsibility. He knew that this encounter would define the rest of his life, and the lives of those connected to him, in ways he could not yet imagine. The ride to the clearing was long and quiet. Santiago moved steadily over the rough terrain, following paths Miguel had memorized during his previous visits. The air was filled with the faint smell of sage and the distant calls of birds, but Miguel hardly noticed. His mind was focused entirely on the encounter ahead. Every step, every movement of his horse reminded him that this was no ordinary meeting. This was a moment where wisdom, respect, and courage would be tested. As he approached the clearing, Miguel saw Chief Nate waiting. The chief's posture was calm but commanding, and his gaze seemed to reach into Miguel's very soul. Behind him, a few warriors stood silently, but they kept a respectful distance. Miguel dismounted carefully, holding Santiago's reins and bowing slightly in respect. Nate's eyes did not waver as he regarded him, and for a moment silence filled the clearing. It was a silence heavy with meaning, as if the land itself were watching. Miguel spoke first, his voice steady but respectful. "Chief Nate, I have reflected on your words and your people's ways. I have considered my choices carefully, and I wish to act with honor and respect. I come not to challenge you, but to find a path that preserves life, respects tradition, and unites our worlds peacefully." The chief's eyes narrowed slightly, studying Miguel closely. "Your words are clear," Nate said, "but words alone do not show understanding. You must demonstrate it. Tell me, Miguel, what choice will you make?" Miguel took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every life connected to this decision. He thought of Isabella, the woman he had always loved, and the family and workers who relied on him. He thought of the Apache people, their traditions, and their sacred connection to the land. And he thought of himself, a man who had always believed in courage and honesty. After a long pause, he spoke again. "Chief Nate, I cannot ignore your warning, nor can I abandon my respect for life and harmony. I propose a union, not of force, but of understanding. I will marry a woman from your people who is willing to unite our communities, showing respect for your traditions while maintaining the peace we all desire." Nate regarded him silently. The other warriors shifted slightly but said nothing. The tension in the clearing was almost unbearable. Miguel could feel the weight of history, tradition, and expectation pressing down on him. He realized that every heartbeat mattered, that every breath and word carried significance. The chief finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. "You have chosen a path of wisdom, humility, and courage. You have considered the lives of many, not just your own desires. This choice honors life, respect, and the sacredness of our land. You may live, Miguel, and your actions will be remembered." Relief washed over Miguel, but it was tempered by awe. He bowed deeply, thanking the chief with all the sincerity he could summon. For the first time, he truly felt the magnitude of the encounter, the lesson of responsibility, the depth of tradition, and the power of understanding over fear. He realized that courage was not only about facing danger, but about choosing wisely when stakes were high and consequences were far-reaching. Chief Nate gestured for Miguel to follow him to a small ridge overlooking the plains. "Look at the land," the chief said softly. "It has survived storms, droughts, and battles. It teaches patience, humility, and respect. You will learn much from it if you continue to listen." Miguel looked out over the rolling hills and valleys, the rivers glinting in the sunlight. He felt a profound connection to the earth, a sense of harmony he had never experienced before. The plains seemed alive, breathing and watching, teaching lessons that could not be spoken but only understood. The chief continued, sharing stories of his ancestors, the wisdom passed down through generations, and the importance of choices that honor both people and land. Miguel listened intently, understanding that the chief's guidance extended beyond this immediate moment. It was a lifelong lesson, one that would guide him not only as a rancher but as a man living in balance with others. He realized that he had been given an extraordinary gift, the chance to grow, learn, and act with integrity. As the sun climbed higher, Miguel felt a renewed sense of determination. He knew that the next step would be difficult, introducing the idea of the union to both Isabella and the Apache community. But he also understood that honesty, respect, and patience would guide him through these conversations. He could not force understanding, but he could act with integrity, demonstrating the sincerity of his intentions through his words and actions. Miguel spent the afternoon with Chief Nate, walking through the plains, observing the land, and learning about its rhythms and patterns. He saw how the Apache used their knowledge of nature to live in harmony, how every plant and animal had a role, and how respect for life was more important than possession or power. Miguel realized that his view of ranching, business, and land ownership had been narrow. True stewardship required understanding, cooperation, and humility. When the meeting concluded, Miguel felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. He had faced a moment that could have ended in tragedy, yet he had chosen wisely, guided by courage, respect, and reflection. He returned to his ranch, carrying the chief's lessons and the knowledge that the choices he made from now on would have meaning far beyond himself. The plains were no longer just a place to work. They were a living classroom, teaching the values of patience, understanding, and life itself. That evening, Miguel reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He thought of Isabella, the Apache people, and the land itself. He knew that the challenges were not over, but he felt ready to face them with wisdom and courage. He wrote in his journal, recording the chief's words, his own reflections, and the lessons he had learned. Every sentence was a reminder that life demanded careful thought, that respect and understanding could prevent conflict, and that courage often meant making difficult choices rather than charging blindly into danger. The next few days were filled with preparation for the union Miguel had proposed. He spoke with Ahioka and other members of the Apache community, explaining his intentions and seeking guidance on how to act respectfully. He also spoke with Isabella, sharing the situation honestly and asking for her understanding. Miguel was careful not to impose his decisions, but to present a vision of harmony that respected both his love for her and the traditions of the Apache. Through these conversations, Miguel learned more about compromise, patience, and communication. He realized that true courage was not just about facing physical danger, but about facing difficult conversations, balancing conflicting interests, and finding solutions that honored all parties. He also discovered the strength of humility, admitting that he did not have all the answers, that he had much to learn, and that listening was often more powerful than speaking. By the end of the week, Miguel felt a sense of calm and purpose he had never known. The Apache community had accepted his proposal, and Isabella, though initially hesitant, had begun to understand the necessity of respect, compromise, and thoughtful action. Miguel saw that his choices, guided by reflection and courage, were creating a foundation for peace and cooperation. He also understood that life would continue to present challenges, but he now had the tools to face them with integrity and wisdom. As he sat by the fire that evening, Miguel reflected on the journey from fear to understanding. The plains stretched out before him, vast and alive, a reminder of the lessons he had learned. Chief Nate's words echoed in his mind, a constant guide. Life and death are often separated by a single decision. Choose wisely and you honor all. Miguel smiled quietly to himself, feeling the truth of those words. Courage, respect, and understanding had saved him, and would continue to guide him in the days and years ahead. And so, Miguel's story reached its emotional peak. He had faced a moment of immense pressure, navigated the delicate balance between love, tradition, and survival, and emerged with wisdom and integrity. The plains, the land, and the Apache people had tested him, and he had proven himself capable of meeting the challenge. His heart was steady, his mind clear, and his path forward, though still filled with responsibilities, was now guided by understanding, courage, and respect. The morning of the Union dawned bright and clear, with the sun rising over the plains and casting golden light across the land. Miguel rode slowly toward the Apache clearing, Santiago moving steadily beneath him. Today was not just a meeting, it was a moment of reconciliation, respect, and hope. He felt a deep sense of purpose, mixed with nervous excitement. The journey that had begun with fear and uncertainty had led to this day, and Miguel knew that every step he took now would be remembered for a lifetime. As he approached the clearing, he saw the Apache community gathered. Children ran playfully, elders stood with calm authority, and warriors stood in respectful silence. Ahioka greeted him with a small, approving nod. Miguel dismounted and bowed deeply in respect to Chief Nate, who stood at the center with his presence both commanding and gentle. The chief's eyes met Miguel's, conveying acknowledgement of the courage, patience, and wisdom he had shown in the days leading up to this moment. Miguel felt a sense of pride, not for himself, but for having honored the balance between his people, the land, and the Apache traditions. The ceremony began simply, yet profoundly. Miguel explained his intentions openly and honestly, addressing both the Apache community and Isabella, who had arrived with a calm but questioning expression. "I come not to claim, but to unite," he said, his voice steady. "I have learned that respect, understanding, and patience are worth more than fear, pride, or even desire. Today, we come together to honor life, harmony, and the sacredness of this land." The words were met with nods and quiet smiles, and for a moment, Miguel felt a wave of relief and joy. Chief Nate spoke next, his voice resonating across the clearing. "Today, we witness a choice that reflects courage, wisdom, and respect. Miguel has shown that understanding others and honoring tradition is greater than personal desire alone. This is the path of harmony, and it will guide both our peoples forward." Miguel listened carefully, absorbing every word. The chief's recognition was not simply praise, it was an acknowledgement that Miguel had embraced lessons that would shape his life and the lives of everyone around him. The union was simple, yet meaningful. Miguel stood beside a young Apache woman chosen by her community, a woman who was willing to unite the two worlds in peace and understanding. Their hands met, not as a symbol of conquest or obligation, but as a promise of cooperation, respect, and shared responsibility. Miguel felt the weight of the moment, realizing that this act symbolized much more than marriage. It represented harmony between two cultures, the bridging of knowledge, and the honoring of life over conflict. As the ceremony continued, Miguel reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He thought of the fear he had felt when Chief Nate first confronted him, the nights of restless thought over missing cattle and mysterious tracks, and the days spent learning from Ahioka and the Apache community. Each moment, each challenge, had taught him lessons about courage, patience, and humility. He realized that bravery was not only about facing danger, but about making difficult decisions guided by respect and understanding. After the ceremony, a celebration began. The Apache community and Miguel's workers shared food, music, and stories. Children ran freely across the plains, laughing and playing, while elders shared lessons and memories of the land. Miguel joined in the festivities, feeling a sense of belonging and connection he had never known. The plains, once a place of isolation and labor, now felt alive with life, harmony, and shared purpose. Miguel understood that this celebration was not just about a union between individuals. It was about a union of worlds, cultures, and hearts. Throughout the day, Miguel spoke with members of the Apache community, learning more about their traditions, values, and stories. He realized that these lessons were gifts, guiding him not only in this moment but in all aspects of life. He thought about Isabella, understanding that her patience and openness had been essential in navigating this delicate situation. Miguel knew that respect and communication would continue to be vital as he worked to maintain harmony between his ranch, his people, and the Apache. As evening fell, the sky painted itself in deep purples and reds. Miguel walked to a small rise overlooking the plains, feeling the cool wind on his face. He held the token Ahioka had given him tightly, remembering the chief's words. Life and death are often separated by a single decision. Choose wisely and you honor all. Miguel smiled quietly. He had faced one of the most difficult decisions of his life, and he had chosen a path guided by wisdom, respect, and courage. He felt a deep sense of peace and fulfillment, knowing that his choices had preserved life and fostered understanding. Miguel returned to his ranch with renewed purpose. He continued to manage his cattle, tend to his land, and care for his workers, but now with a new perspective. Every action he took was measured by respect for others, for the land, and for the lessons he had learned from the Apache. He shared these lessons with his workers, teaching them the importance of observation, patience, and understanding. Over time, the ranch became not only a place of productivity, but also a symbol of cooperation, respect, and harmony with nature. In the weeks and months that followed, Miguel nurtured the relationship between his ranch and the Apache community. They shared knowledge, assisted one another during difficult seasons, and built trust that strengthened with each passing day. Miguel saw that the land thrived when treated with care, respect, and understanding. The cattle prospered, the workers were safe, and the bond between the two communities grew stronger. Miguel had not only survived the challenge but had created a legacy of harmony and cooperation. One afternoon, Miguel sat with his grandchildren by the river that ran through the plains. He told them the story of his journey, the encounter with Chief Nate, the lessons learned, and the choice he had made. His voice was calm and steady, filled with warmth and wisdom. Life will test you, he said, sometimes in ways that seem frightening or impossible. But remember this: respect others, listen to the land, and make choices guided by courage and understanding. That is how we honor life and create peace. The children listened intently, absorbing the lessons their grandfather had learned through experience, challenge, and reflection. Miguel reflected on how far he had come since that fateful morning when Chief Nate first confronted him. He had entered the plains with fear and uncertainty, focused only on his ranch, his cattle, and his personal life. Through the trials, lessons, and guidance of the Apache community, he had grown into a man who understood the importance of balance, respect, and responsibility. He realized that life was not just about survival or personal gain. It was about relationships, understanding, and the choices we make to honor the world around us. Years passed, and Miguel's ranch continued to flourish. The union he had proposed became a model for cooperation and understanding in the region. Visitors would come to the plains, curious about the harmony between the ranch and the Apache community. Miguel welcomed them, sharing his story and the lessons he had learned. He emphasized the importance of listening, observing, and respecting both people and the land. His words inspired many, showing that courage and wisdom often come from thoughtfulness rather than confrontation. As he grew older, Miguel would often ride across the plains at sunrise, reflecting on the journey that had shaped his life. The land remained a teacher, reminding him of the delicate balance between human ambition and respect for the world around us. He knew that the plains, the Apache community, and the lessons he had learned would continue to guide him, even in his final days. Every sunset, every river bend, and every gust of wind was a reminder of the path he had chosen and the wisdom he had gained. Miguel's story became a tale of courage, respect, and understanding that was told for generations. It was a story not only of survival, but of learning, growth, and the power of thoughtful choice. The plains, once a place of uncertainty and fear, had become a symbol of harmony and life. Miguel had faced the ultimate challenge and emerged with integrity, humility, and wisdom, leaving behind a legacy that would inspire others to value respect, patience, and understanding above all else. And so, Miguel's life continued in peace and fulfillment. He had navigated the most difficult choices of his life, balanced love and respect, tradition and personal desire, and emerged with a path that honored life itself. The plains, the Apache community, and his own heart had guided him toward a future filled with cooperation, understanding, and harmony. Miguel knew that he had learned the most important lesson of all. Life demands courage not just in facing danger, but in making wise, thoughtful, and respectful choices that honor all who share this world.